Thank you, Christy. So Adam, Christy, or Adam, Candace, Heather, and if you all remember Alex Kappas, we all partnered together in creating this style of presentation. So this was definitely a group effort to bring you this material today. So my name is Megan Sherman. I'm the coordinator for Student Accessibility Services here at Central Carolina Community College, and I'll let my co-presenters present them, introduce themselves as well.
Hi, I am Candace Solis. I am the Director of Student Onboarding and Success. I'm happy to be here today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Adam Wade. I serve as Director of Admissions.
Thanks, guys. So our agenda today is to review the Central Carolina Community College policy in responding to emergent situations on campus. We're also going to give you a framework on how you can respond to a student with a mental health crisis. And then we're going to discuss some community resources that are available in each county that we serve, as well as some campus resources that are available on all 3 campuses that we work at. We'll be reviewing some warning signs and symptoms that may cause you to need to be prepared to support students. And then lastly, we are going to review some next steps on helping you prepare with some additional professional development opportunities.
So we're going to jump right in here because this is a short amount of time to discuss a really important topic, which we probably could spend hours on. But we're going to talk about how you should respond to students who are experiencing mental health concerns. First, right, regardless of your role, we want to start by listening and listening to understand and listening with compassion, right? And understanding that, number one, our role in whatever role you're coming to this session from, your role is really to listen, understand their concern, and refer them out to the best resource, either that's internal to CCCC or external to us, some of our partners. So we're always going to try to refer the student to resources outside of us. None of us are, that I'm aware of on the call today, are hired as mental health counselors. And so that is certainly not an expectation of you to serve in that capacity at CCCC. So make sure that you're listening, right? When students come to you with concerns or questions, or maybe if you're approaching someone to ask questions, that you're coming to that conversation with a lot of compassion and a wanting to listen and learn from them. And then, of course, we're going to try to refer the student. If you already have resources in mind, certainly you can refer the student to those resources, verbally suggest them. You can also email them some resources as needed, or maybe you're not in a capacity or in a position right now to know what those resources are, and that's also completely fine. And you can refer to any one of us on the call or any staff member in our student services division, and they can help suggest and connect students to resources. You always, a lot of times people will ask, what situation should be reported? And if you're asking yourself that question, the answer is yes, it should be reported. And so you see here on the screen, create a BAT report. BAT stands for Behavioral Assessment Team. We're going to talk about that later. But anytime you're working with a student who you're maybe either connecting to resources or you have concern over, always file a report. That report can be found on our website. I'll throw that in the chat shortly. Additionally, you might be asking yourself, what are types of situations that I should call security or even call 911? You can think of it in sort of these parameters, and we tried to be as specific as we could. Non-life-threatening situations, you can certainly call CCCC Safety and Security, and I'll also throw that website in the chat if you haven't been to their website. They do have a pretty comprehensive website with lots of information there. Additionally, like if you're thinking on the other side of that, if you feel like it's something more life-threatening, then call 911 directly. And then anytime you call 911, they're always going to loop our campus safety and security into the situation. So non-life-threatening, it's fine to call your local or your campus specific security number to respond. And those numbers can be found on that website. And then, of course, life-threatening situations, we want to call 911 directly because we need someone to respond immediately that can assist that student in the best way. Other thing to mention, in your building or on your campus, likely there are placards. We have campus security and safety procedures. We have a manual for this that's located on our security website. Thank you, Megan, for putting that in the chat. But we also have little placards, like there's little cards that are attached to all the buildings and on each of our campuses that sort of outline our emergency response procedures. So if you haven't ever taken a look at that, take a moment to review those in detail so that you know what our campus procedures are. So that would be typically our response, and we're sharing this with you in an abbreviated way. Certainly, you might have a more complex situation that requires a lot more, discussion. But certainly, whenever you're in doubt, call security, call 911, engage those folks in helping. The 3 people on this call can also help refer to resources or have conversations. So we're used to doing this work. And we're going to move right along here, Megan. So some things, I'd invite you to throw some additional ones in the chat if you wish, but as you're thinking about some things that can affect, mental health, you might see some things on this list that have affected your mental health, right? Things like fluctuations in relationships, breakups, new relationships, academic pressures, poor grades, financial stressors. Everyone on this call has been through a pandemic over the past couple of years, right? And all of the stress that has come with that. So these are endless, and these are just a few options, right? That can create stressors and affect mental health in our students, but also us. The other things to keep a lookout for are some of the common symptoms or some of the common signs that someone might need some help or intervention, right? You might notice that maybe they feel a little bit more sad than normal. Their appearance has changed. Maybe they have difficulty in your class, or when they're with you, concentrating on what you're saying. Maybe you see a change in their mood or demeanor, or if you notice them trying to harm themselves or sharing with you maybe some verbal language that indicates that. So right, you always want to sort of keep your antennas up, keep your eyes open for some of those common symptoms that someone might need some assistance. And again, not a comprehensive list, but just some things to keep your eyes open for.
And so in just a moment, we're going to review that short framework for how to respond to a mental health crisis or a student or coworker who may be displaying some of those signs and symptoms. But just as a general flow, here's some do's and don'ts around planning for that response. You want to make sure that you're creating a safe environment. So having these conversations with students, checking in with them in a distraction-reduced area, a quiet area. It may not need to be a confidential space where you have a closed door, especially if you're concerned about your own safety, but you do want to provide enough security and comfort to be able to have a full conversation with a student. Start with some open-ended questions, the what's, the how's, when's, where's, and that way you're open to this, hearing the student's full experience, and we're not making any assumptions or working from any preconceived notions or concern, but we're asking those open-ended questions to better understand their circumstances and their feelings, and then listening. I know that's really basic, but that active listening of I hear you say, or you have shared with me, can really validate individuals' feelings in the moment and help them feel more comfortable at talking to you, which by then will also make them more receptive to the support or referral that you may suggest at the end of a conversation. letting them know that you understand by using that active listening. It may not be, I understand where you're coming from. It could be, I understand you have shared with me, or you have talked about today. Using that kind of language, again, can be really validating to someone's experience that they're sharing with you. Being respectful and non-judgmental of what they are sharing, not pushing or assuming. Reassure them that if they're feeling stressed and it's midterms, that is normal and that is common. That is, it doesn't make them a bad student. But being reassuring in what they've shared with you. Try to recognize stigma. So are they experiencing this because of other students? Are they experiencing this because of something in their cultural beliefs or their personal beliefs? And so try not to compare, but take care of their physical well-being as well. Other things, take them seriously. Do not minimize their issue. Oh, you know, an example of that may be, oh, this happens to everybody. That sounds different than this is normal. Everybody has felt this way. It's midterms. That is a usual feeling I hear about from students. Minimizing it would be, oh, everybody feels that way. Don't worry about it. And that can, you know, invalidate their experience and make them more resistant to the support that you and the college may offer them. Share mental health resources. So being concrete about some of the resources we're going to talk about in just a minute and giving those specific examples, email follow-ups, encouraging them to use those resources, and don't promise confidentiality. I think we'll talk about this at the end of the presentation briefly, but you don't know what they may share moments after. Promising not to share it with anyone is not within your role, unfortunately, as a college employee. But what you can say is, I will only share this with college staff whom need to support you. So that reassures them that you're not going to tell everybody, but that you may need to disclose their experience or what they've shared with you with specific individuals to get them support. If you do refer a student, try and follow up with them, closing the loop to make sure that they were able to make contact with other offices or other resources. This is also part of what the BAT team will do if they are referred to reach out to a student. So that general 5-step in responding in real time, and again, this is a very simple framework that I want you to reflect on and see what you can build out from here. But read the scene. Is this person your student? Is the space safe? Is the space somewhat confidential? Are you safe? Are they safe? Set the tone. So some of those reassuring factors, some of those open-ended questions, and that active listening will set the tone for the conversation so that hopefully the student understands that you are there to support them and hear out what their concern is. You may not have the answer, and you are not expected to have the answer, but you are there to support them. Listen efficiently. So again, active listening. You have shared with me today that you're going through some difficult times at home. You have shared with me today that you are feeling stressed. These kinds of things can reaffirm that the person has been heard, and then continue to assess the situation. So what kind of support is most vital for this student? What's their main concern? And then act decisively. So is there a need for more support? Do you need to contact 911 because they're unsafe? Or you are concerned for their safety? Do you need to refer them to counseling or the BAT team? Take time to respond in a timely manner and make sure that your follow-up is decisively done.
So what are your responsibilities as faculty and staff? One of the best things that you can do is listen and refer. It is important to note that no hired staff at Central Carolina works in the capacity of mental health care provider for Central Carolina. So even if a staff member or faculty member holds a mental health care title, they are not acting in that capacity as a mental health care provider, nor is that directly reflective of their designated role. So please ensure that you make referrals to the services that are available in the community and resources that we provide externally for our students, such as the Student Assistance Program. It's also important to follow FERPA and the provided published procedures that are in our college manual. So how do you engage resources in the community? Success coaches. Success coaches are a wonderful resource for student support here at CCCC. Success coaches support students' academic, personal, and career-based goals through an individualized coaching process. They do not provide counseling services, but they do spend time listening to students, offering support, and then of course making any necessary referrals for continued student care. Aunt Bertha is also another resource that you can utilize. I don't know if you've used Aunt Bertha before, but it's a great resource for student support referrals. They have things that can connect you to housing options, food pantries that are available, but of course also mental health resources from the community. So that's a great resource. There are additional community resources if you need some. There are some right there listed on the screen. Please feel free to use them. You can also create your own list. I encourage you to do that. By collecting a list of local service providers, you will have a passive list that you have available for students that may be in need. Also, I just want to point your attention towards a list of resources that can be found on the CCCC Cares page. It's listed under the mental health resources in PDF form. So that's a great list to get you started as you kind of navigate a referral list for community resources.
So the Student Assistance Program is a fairly new program. It was started by the community college system back in, I think, last spring. But essentially, it does provide free counseling to students and their families. So students can contact the Student Assistance Program by phone and initiate a counseling relationship. During that phone call, they'll meet with a triage counselor who will help them identify an area of concern. That area of concern will qualify the student for 3 free sessions with a counselor about that area of concern. Once those 3 free sessions are used, the student does have the option to continue in a self-pay or an insurance copay relationship with that provider, or they can recontact the Student Assistance Program, work with the triage counselor to identify an additional issue, and then qualify for 3 additional counseling sessions with a care provider. It is unlimited areas of concern, and again, where that triage counselor will help them identify that. And it is, like I said, it is available to the students and their families. So it's a very valuable resource and a great referral tool. Very similar to our employee assistance program, if you're familiar with that. There's also the option to refer students to my office. If the student were to identify, I am diagnosed with a disorder or I'm already seeing a counselor and I am diagnosed with an area of concern and I am experiencing symptoms that are affecting my ability to learn and to participate in class, that is definitely an open opportunity for you to refer them to my office and tell them about accessibility services, that they may be eligible for accommodations and support through my office. I would not go into any specifics about what those supports may be because every student situation is different, but definitely refer them. And if you're unsure how to approach that with a student, let's talk. And you can always just send them an email. Hey, Sally, you shared with me that you have an area of concern, that you're seeing a health provider. I want to introduce you to Megan Sherman, and that email could go to Sally and to me, and that will initiate that contact on my behalf or on my part to reach out to them and tell them more about the process.
Okay, and we mentioned behavioral assessment team earlier in the presentation, but when you're submitting a report, what we call a behavioral assessment team report or a BAT report, it goes to our behavioral assessment team. You might be asking you, what is this mysterious behavioral assessment team? Just a quick review of what this is. It is a team of folks, a cross-section of folks from across our 3-county region, or our 3-county service area. And it consists of lots of people that represent lots of different parts of our college, curriculum, continuing education, and so forth. Lots of just about every of our area of our college is represented. We're really reviewing those reports and that behavior that's submitted on those reports to see if there's any action that needs to be taken. A little bit of background: behavioral assessment teams or threat assessment teams really came about during really one of the initial campus shootings at Virginia Tech. And so these teams were born out of sort of situations like that, where we needed some sort of group or space to collect information on students. So as an example, Megan might have a little bit of information on a student, and I might have something completely different, but we might not be sharing that information necessarily. And so this was a communication tool, not only to be able to collect information, track students over time. So I think the thing I want you to take away is that the goal of the BAT team is to, number one, to maintain the safety of every single student on campus, while at the same time balancing the safety of the larger campus community. And so sometimes that results in action being taken for a student, whether we refer them to resources or that we might put other supports in place or other requirements for a student in place. Sometimes that doesn't result in any action at all, and that we're just we're gathering information and we're tracking from a case management perspective students over time. So some of the behaviors we tend to see: self-injury, suicidal ideation, sometimes erratic or behavior that's different from a student's norm. And then any behaviors or things that we see in verbal or nonverbal communication that just would be concerning from a safety standpoint. So I'm going to stop there. We could probably talk about the BAT a lot more and a lot about this topic, because I think we want to get to questions, right, Megan?
Yeah, I do want to skip questions for just 1 second and go over some potential next steps, just so you guys can have that before we take questions. But here's some links that we have shared in the chat today, in addition to some community resources. All of this information is on the CC Cares page, which has been linked in the chat. But in addition to today's session, again, this is a very high-level overview of this topic. We have 2 opportunities for you to deepen your learning in this area. First would be the mental health first aid training. Adam and I are 2 of the 4 trainers on campus who are trained in providing that session. It is an 8-hour comprehensive first aid style response to mental health care. And during that training, you would learn more about how to respond, what signs and symptoms that you're supposed to be looking for and noticing, as well as some escalated situations and responses that escalated situations and how to respond to those situations, that can really prepare you for a variety of things here in our CCCC community, but also in your broader community, whether you're at a soccer game with your kids or at a church or a family gathering. So that could be a really fruitful experience if you want to learn more about this topic. And another option is our professional development website, which again we've linked here. Erin has a variety of videos recorded from previous sessions around this topic, as well as some self-paced courses through Ed2Go about mental health resources and responses. So those are 2 options for you to continue your learning in this area. But let's take some questions. We have about 10 minutes, so any questions anybody has, you feel free to put it in the chat or unmute. And Christy, I don't know if we want to stop recording for questions, just in case.
Sure, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, so I've stopped the recording, so any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or pop those in the chat for Megan, Candace, and Adam. Thank you, Katie. Great. Lord, we do come up with any questions, I'm sure Megan, Candace, and Adam will be happy to take those via email or phone call or however you want to reach out to them. They are all three a wealth of knowledge, and we're lucky to have them here. So appreciate you joining us and sharing this information. And we have recorded the session to send it out and to post it for others to view. So thank you all. And any last things before we wrap up? Great.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much.